Good evening and welcome to the Monday, October 17, 2017 meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. Could I ask the clerk to call the roll? I'm only a year ahead, Biddy. Come on.
Trying to get retired.
Yeah, you just
Honorable Mayor Schoenheider.
Here.
Alderman Waldeck is absent. Alderman Beidler.
Here.
Alderman Pandeleon.
Here.
Alderman Newman.
Here.
Alderman Tack.
Here.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Here.
Alderman Edelman and Alderman Moreno are absent. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Biddy. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. First item on the agenda, reports of city officers and comments by mayor. I have one thing this evening. If you remember back in May, we had representatives from Commonwealth Edison here to talk a little bit about the rollout of the smart meter program. And there were quite a few questions. The ComEd representatives did their best to address it. And as the rollout began, we began to get a lot of questions from residents about things that had been asked, things like safety, things about safety and control of data. And so there was enough of a concern or question that we began to ask our own questions about it. As you remember, ComEd has allowed a temporary opt-out. At this point in time, residents can opt out through the end of 2019 with a $21.53 monthly opt-out charge. In the process, several municipalities, including Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and Burr Ridge, passed resolutions asking ComEd to further explore a permanent opt-out of the smart meters, or at least to continue the opt-out over a longer period of time. I'm happy to tell you that ComEd heard us, and they filed a tariff with the ICC, which just this past week was approved. So at this point, residents can now opt out until June 30 of 2022. So we have quite a bit more time. The downside is you still have to pay the opt-out fee, the $21.53 a month. But Jim and I met with representatives of ComEd a couple of weeks ago, and they understand the concern. They're getting very, very limited opt-outs across their system. They've put in about 2.7 million of the smart meters to date in their service area, and they have less than 1% opt-out. Ironically, in Lake Forest, the installations as of, I think it's early October, were a little over 1,000, and the opt-outs were over 6%. So we have a significantly higher percentage here in town than a lot of the other communities. But my comment about this and why I'm encouraged about it is we had a very good meeting with ComEd. Senior representatives were there. We again voiced our concern that we hear from our residents about the smart meter program. And they assured us a couple things. Number one, they did say they thought it would be unlikely that at some point the smart meters, you could permanently opt out of the smart meter program. But the extension is significant because it's doing a couple of things. They're now able to begin research and analysis with the companies that make the meters and their internal folks about perhaps changing how they collect the data, how often the meter runs, which I think has been a concern for those worried about safety. They talked about the idea that perhaps at some point in time, you could actually schedule when your meter would run and they would collect the usage data. Or perhaps, you could limit it to a certain number of times per week, per month. If you're concerned about safety and you don't want to be standing by it while they're running it, you could have it done at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so they believe the meters have the technology to do that. They are digging into that process at this point. And they're hoping within the next 2 to 3 years to have a better handle on exactly what it is they can do to address some of the concerns that residents here in Lake Forest and elsewhere have had. Again, I'm pleased that ComEd listened to us. It's great that they're working hard to do it. I am a little bit concerned. I don't know, perhaps it was in Cranes or somewhere that there have been some issues. ComEd has begun to put forth some ideas about rates based upon time of usage. So that obviously then kind of factors back into the smart meter issue. So The good news is we've got some more time. The good news is ComEd's heard us and they're looking at different options. And I'm grateful that they're doing that, and I appreciate, Jim, all your work on that as well. That ends my
Mr. Mayor,
comments.
Could I
Yes, I'm
could I ask
sorry.
a question on that? I'm still like, I'm not so sure I fully understand the $21.53. But if I think I got it right, I'm a little upset by that too. So if you do what you've always done and you didn't get to start the smart meter, you're asking for no more. You're getting the same level of service, but you're having to pay $21.53 a month, even though they are saving substantial amount of money on that other 94% in Lake Forest that is not getting that same level of service because they don't have somebody coming out and reading the meter. So they've got all this savings, but they're still jumping on these folks who decided to, the 6%, who decided not to have a smart meter. Is that correct?
I think your concept is correct, Jack. I think the idea, though, is that, again, they would have to pay people to come out and read the meter.
But they're
obviously.
doing that now.
That's correct. That's
They're
correct.
doing that now.
Yeah.
It should be a wash.
No, I can't necessarily argue with you on it, so.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's, I also like that, I also wanted to get that on the record.
Yep, understand.
Thanks, Sue.
Next item on the agenda this evening, comments by City Manager Bob Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If I could ask Jim to first put up the overhead. As the council knows, this room very shortly is going to be full of voters. And so we thought this evening, before we got to the published agenda, I'd ask the city clerk, Biddy Boyer, to review the early voting information for City Halls. Biddy?
Thank you. Actually, early voting is currently running at the Lake County Clerk's office. It started on September 29th. Folks can go there and register to vote and vote the same day at the county clerk's office. For us here at City Hall, it starts next Monday. Monday through Friday, voting hours are from 9 to 5, Saturdays 9 to 2. If you're not registered to vote yet, we recommend that you can go online and register there, or go to Lake County Clerk's office and register there also. The other information pieces is that anybody who lives in Lake County can vote at any polling place, whether it's during early voting or on election day. So last year during early voting, we saw about 35 to 40 folks who work in town, and this was more convenient for them to come and cast their ballot. Clerk Carla Wyckoff was here today, and she told us that the numbers are up about 40,000 new registered voters from last year at this time. So I encourage everybody to go out and vote, get registered and vote.
Biddy, what's the online address? You go to the Lake County Clerk to register online? What would that be?
It's lakecountyclerk.info is where you would go.
Okay.
And you can call us here at the 810-3676 number, or the other phone number is Lake County Clerk's office directly.
Okay. And get the information of how to do it online?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have a slightly different question.
Sure.
For people who are voting by mail, which I may end up doing, I received all the materials, and nowhere does it say when the start and end dates are for that kind of voting, for voting by mail. I'm just curious if you have any idea what the deadlines are, whether it starts and ends at a certain date, or if you can just send it in, next year sometime.
Well, you can't send it in next year.
I assume.
Or you can, it
But
just
does
won't be counted.
Does it have to be postmarked on election day? Or, there's nothing in there about any of that. It's very odd.
Well, you're correct about that. It actually does have to be postmarked by, on election day. You can actually request a ballot by mail through November 6th, I believe it is, 5th or 6th. And then the county has until that day to mail you a ballot, and then it has to be postmarked by the 8th to be returned.
So anytime up to the 8th.
Anytime up until election day.
And it could have been 3 months ago.
It's the whole couch potato voting.
Got it.
Sit at home on your couch and vote.
That would be me.
Thank you, Biddy. The next item on the agenda, we have a special guest with us this evening. Ann Main, our president of the Lake County Forest Preserve District and county board member, is here to talk about the Des Plaines River Challenge. So, Ann?
Thank you. Mayor, Alderman, City Manager. Well, thank you for giving me a few moments of your time this evening. You know, the city and the Forest Preserve have a great partnership going back many years, and I know that the city has been working on their trail system and working to get people more active. So I wanted to do two things. First, give you an update about some of the connections that are going on. And yes, we are moving ahead with that Middle Fork Savannah Bridge. We're looking at bids in November. And in addition, as I was at another meeting today, and I've seen the surveyors out working on the alignment for the trail that's going to go along Everett Road on the north side initially, from Riverwoods Road headed west toward Daniel Wright Woods. So that's just going to be a really great connection. Anyone in Conway, western part, but really anyone in Lake Forest because of the trail system that you have. So I wanted to let you know of a special event that's going on, started August 1st and is going to finish November 30th, and that is the Des Plaines River Trail Challenge. As you know, we completed the trail last year. It was 50 years in the making. It's finally done. And so instead of our usual Hike Lake County challenge, we've put out a challenge to complete the Des Plaines River Trail. You don't have to do it all in one session, not to worry. It's 31.4 miles, and you can hike, bike, paddle it, horseback, unicycle, whatever it is you desire, and complete that trail. There's a number of spots along the trail if you're into selfies, where you can take selfies and download them to the Forest Preserve site. People have been enjoying that. And so if you complete that trail, and you can fill out the log and submit it, I did not bring mine. I should have done show and tell. You get a real nice, what they call a sling bag, a bag that just goes over one shoulder, and it's got the logo of the Forest Preserve as well as the Preservation Foundation, which is the charitable arm of the Forest Preserve. And you get a nice luggage tag. If you want that swag but don't have the time, I won't say ability, but you don't have the time to do the trail, for $100, you can become a trail champion anyway. And we've had a number of people do that. And I think we've had 181 people complete the challenge. I did it. I biked it one day with my husband. And there's a lot of great stuff. So even if you've been out recently, the Lowhead dams have been removed. Well, the ones that you can see from the trail just south of Route 60. It's a great time in the fall with all those fall flowers. And so I encourage everyone to come out and take the Des Plaines River Trail Challenge. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about this or anything else. I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Questions for Ann?
Okay. Well, good. Thank you.
Maybe what we might want to do is nominate Alderman Edelman to be the representative of the city council to do the challenge.
We'll take a motion on that in a bit.
I'm sure he will appreciate it, so.
That's what happens when you're not here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Michelle could join him.
Kathy?
Okay.
Where is it, Kathy? Beautiful. Thank you. At the last city council meeting, the subject came up about demolitions in Lake Forest and sort of the implication that we do not permit demolitions in Lake Forest. And so as Kathy Cerniak and I were chatting, I think we felt that we had failed to properly educate both the council and the community about really what's going on. And as we know, perception is reality, at least until we're able to provide facts that dismiss those perceptions and those false realities. And that's what we're going to try and do here this evening regarding demolitions. But one of the other things I want to do is after we go through this brief presentation is that there's going to be a homework assignment for the city council and everybody else in attendance or watching at home, if you will. So let me quickly go through here. So just looking back, the far left-hand column is the various date classifications. The middle column is the average number of demolitions approved per year. And then the far right-hand column is the demolitions denied, because I think there's a perception out there that we deny an awful lot of permits or applications for demolition. But as you can see, pre-1987, we were averaging about 6 demolition permits approved a year, and we have no record of denying any prior to 1987. From 87 to 2000, during this roughly 13-year period of time, we averaged 7.5, and there was actually 5 applications that were denied by the city. In 2000, between 2000 and 2016, you see the numbers are going up on the average number of demolitions approved each year. Currently we're at about 19, averaging about 19 demolition permits a year. I will point out that the last recorded denial that we have on record is actually back in 2007. So that was almost 10 years ago since the last petition was submitted that did not meet the city standards and requirements. This gives you a little more detailed information looking back, and I know that's fairly small, but it's basically from 1987 to today. From 1987 to today, you see that roughly we have averaged somewhere between 8 and 16 permits a year. We've had some anomaly years like 2011 and 1994, but you can see really starting in 2001 through 2010, there was a pretty sharp increase in the total number of demolition approvals as we look back. Looking, roughly we've had 304 in this 30-year period of time. In the last 10 years, about 165. But in that 30-year period of time, those 304 represent about 4% of the total housing stock that we have in the city. So we haven't had huge numbers of demolitions, but obviously we've had, I think, considerably more than I think most people think that we've had as well. Also, I think when you couple this with the fact that our experience is that although we've had one recent example, that these aren't large, expensive homes that are being demolished. They tend to be the more modest homes in the community, and so we have a limited supply of those homes that actually are available or have been subject to demolition permits over the years. This gives you an idea of across the community where the permits have generally been the last 4 years, primarily east of Green Bay Road and in some of those neighborhoods that have more modest housing. But there has been a scattering throughout the community as we look at this map.
Much of them are on the lake.
So one of the things that I guess I want to leave you with here this evening is, and we, I think, have copies of these slides in front of you that you can take with you, is that, despite this perception that we don't permit demolitions in Lake Forest, we clearly do and we clearly have. Now, it doesn't mean that we encourage them, and I think also before you is a copy of a resolution that was adopted a number of years ago by the City Council, and then just within the last year and a half was updated with the assistance of the real estate community, that basically says that while we permit demolitions, we take them very seriously. And we take them very seriously, not so much that a house can't come down, but it's important to understand what house is going in its place and to make sure that contextually the replacement home fits well with the neighborhood and so forth. And I think if you just take a look at the community, you can see that over the last 30 years that it's been done very well by our boards and commissions, whether it's the Building Review Board, the Historic Preservation Commission, or in addition to that, there have been some demolition permits that have been administered by staff, simply because the home has been determined to be unsafe and needs to be taken down. Those have been, with few exceptions, but those actually have existed. And I think I want to emphasize that during this period of time, and I think members of the council have served on those various boards and commissions, you know that those boards take this issue very seriously. They are not cavalier about it. They're very thoughtful in their deliberations. But at the end of the day, they look and say what's best for the community. And I think in some cases, we've even had some examples where the Building Review Board has recommended that the developer actually tear down the whole house and not try and keep just a portion of it, and to the detriment of the neighbors in the area. The other thing I'd mention too, that in the early years, the majority of the applications were by homeowners, people who were living in houses that loved the neighborhood, wanted to stay in the neighborhood, but wanted to change his house. I actually had a house behind me that was torn down and completely rebuilt. Family moved out for a year while the house was being rebuilt and then moved back in. Nowadays, it's more about 57 to 60% are speculative. And that's sort of interesting, and we have a chart here that I could show you, but we've actually had a number of applications that have been approved by a board or commission, and then the permit never pulled. That, you know, they're waiting to see if somebody will buy the house before they actually demolish it and so forth. And we've had a number of those in more recent years. So what is the homework assignment? So what Kathy and I would like to ask the City Council, and actually the press and people who might be watching at home as well, is that we have heard these kinds of questions come up over the years, and most of them are not based on fact, but on perceptions or urban legends or whatever the case might be. And so we would love to hear what you have heard out there from your constituents, from business owners, what have you, about the processes and procedures in the Community Development Department that we would like to address factually at a future City Council meeting. And if we have a lot of them, we can take them one at a time. If we have a few of them, we can deal them in one meeting. But you know, you may have heard something like it takes forever to get a permit processed, or you know, the boards and commissions are unreasonable, or I need to hire a certain architect if I'm going to get anything before a building review board, or, you know, those kinds of things that come up. So what we'd like to be able to do is to collect all of those perceptions and comments and questions that you may have heard over time from residents, and be able to address them one at a time, much like, you know, the data here this evening with respect to demolition permits, so that we can then address them and hopefully move forward and provide more facts about what's really going on, and not based on someone's experience 30 years ago that they're still carrying over today. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any easy questions. Kathy Cerniak's here if there's any really hard questions that you might have. But we have this data, and thank Kathy and her staff for pulling this together, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Bob? George?
Could you go back to the original slide that showed the number of demolitions? Let's see.
That one or the
Next
this
one, that one. Okay. So since 2000, so in the last 17 years approximately, there have been 32 demolition requests. Am I reading that right?
No, it's
Oh, per year?
Per year.
Okay, okay.
yeah, it's per year.
And only one has ever been denied since 2000?
Correct.
So I don't know what the percentage is, but it's got to be something like 99% get approved.
Correct.
And if I remember the one case, that house subsequently was renovated and I think won a Historic Preservation Award.
That is correct.
So,
So there.
So there. That's right. Yeah, and so, you know, I would submit that our process works, because part of the denial, keep in mind, is if we deny it, there's just a waiting period, but then they can ultimately come back and tear it down. And in that case, they did not. The waiting period worked from the standpoint that someone stepped in, felt as though it was worth preserving, invested or made the investment in that house, and as you said, it's a spectacular home and it's won awards.
I think it was the applicant, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Was it Kathy? Yeah.
Yeah. I was on the Building Review Board when that happened. Yeah.
So,
Tim?
Do we have any more granular type of data, like how long does it take for the average demolition permit to be approved? So you mentioned earlier that if you have to go through a process of, we need to know what the replacement structure is going to look like, then a demolition permit requires you to go before BRB and maybe Historic Pres or whatever. And any idea how long that whole process takes? Could that be a source of discontent among some of the residents?
Oh, it absolutely can, Alderman, and I think Kathy can pull that information together. I will tell you my observation, without having necessarily the data, is it's the quality of the application that comes in with the request for demolition. Because I said, a lot of the focus is not so much on the home, and believe me, there's still a lot of homes in town that if they came in tomorrow and asked for a demolition, we'd say fine. The real question is what the replacement home looks like and making sure that it fits in with the neighborhood. And we've had some, and I'm sure Kathy would tell you that we've had some that have been approved in one meeting. We've had some that probably took 4 or 5. And a lot of it was just the quality of the application. And I think Alderman Reisenberg made a comment, I think at the last meeting, with the committee that he served on that asked developers to come in. And I think that's what we heard from the developers, is that there's some very good ones, some very good architects, very good builders. They understand the process and they follow the rules. And then we have some that don't. And it's those that don't that take a lot of staff time, that unfortunately, stop work orders and those kinds of things that happen, and they become more problematic. And those are the ones that will take 4 or 5 months. And I guess I say, so what? That, you know what, it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get the data, and we're not making different rules for different people. Everybody knows what the rules are as they come in. Some adhere to the rules and some don't, and it's those that don't tend to take a little longer. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to. You have to deal with these people, so you don't want to say.
Bob, I would just say, I love the chart. I think anytime we've got metrics, I think a lot of us, I'm happy to share anecdotal stuff that I hear, and sometimes if enough of us are getting the same stuff, we may be able to have a pattern and some reasonable suggestions and so on, but the metrics are so useful. Because we're looking at this, I mean, this is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And I think Tim's point about the timing is a good one, but anytime you can get us the data, it's so helpful.
Yeah. We will absolutely do that.
The better the architect, the shorter the process.
Well, the more familiar the architect or developer is with the way we do business.
That helps.
Right.
That helps too, yeah.
I mean, it does kind of narrow it down and does restrict choice to some degree, but there's a positive payoff there, I think. If somebody wants a world famous architect from New York, whatever, there's a learning curve for that guy.
I didn't necessarily mean from an artistic standpoint. I think I meant more from a process standpoint.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
What's the minimum cost to get a permit to demolish a house? So let's say there's a house that the city agrees needs to be demolished because it's structurally unsound. Somebody buys it, then applies to demolish it, essentially doing us a favor. What's the minimum cost to them?
Kathy or Elizabeth?
The demolition cost, the major cost is a $12,000 demolition tax. The city instituted that a number of years ago. Half of that goes to support infrastructure, because we do know that most of the time when homes are demolished, larger homes, larger footprints, more impervious surface are put in their place. We know that there is wear and tear on curbs and roads. So $6,000 of that $12,000 goes to support infrastructure. $6,000 goes to support affordable and moderate housing, because 98% of the time, the homes that are being torn down are our most affordable homes, and normally what's put in their place is 2 or 3 or 4 times the size and the cost.
No, and I get that, but if you have a home that is really structurally unsound that theoretically nobody should be living in, why should we charge the same rate for that demolition versus a small home that is livable but is maybe not, maybe up to modern standards but still very livable? Should it be the same?
And there is an appeal process. But I think in past discussions, there's also been the concern about landlords who choose to defer maintenance, who intentionally, essentially we've called it demolition by neglect. So it gets a little bit hard to judge. Do we want to incent people to neglect their homes, cause problems in the neighborhood so that they get the $12,000 demolition fee waived. Most of the time what we see is, given the overall cost, obviously the majority of the cost is in the replacement structure. The $12,000 demolition fee for most homeowners who are coming in and doing this as part of a upgrade to their home in the same neighborhood, that $12,000 is really a minimal cost. Where we do see some pushback is situations where we have developers purchasing property, speculating, and they want their upfront costs to be as low as possible. But there is an opportunity to appeal to the city manager to waive that demolition tax. And I believe we have done that on 1 or 2 occasions.
Other questions for Bob or Kathy? Bob, I think to your point, I mean, this community is what it is because of how we approach these issues. And I don't think there's any reason to think that we should approach it any differently. As you and I and Kathy have spoken, I think we can always look at how we do the process, making sure we're providing homeowners, residents, future residents, architects, builders with the process, understand what to expect, understand how long something might take, and understand what we're looking for. And I think we just want to make sure that our process and our communications are clear, because I think that goes a long way toward dispelling a lot of misperceptions and incorrect information in the process. Right. So I know you two are both tackling it. I think that's important as well. It's important for the community to know that we're focused on that also.
Absolutely. So don't wait until November 6th to send me your ideas and your thoughts and perceptions. So as soon as you remember them, or maybe over a glass of wine later on tonight or this weekend, feel free to send them to either Kathy or myself so that we can begin to start addressing this, and we'll put them on future city council agendas so we can have very public conversations like this evening.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Any other items for you?
I'm done this evening.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, comments by council members. First item, Finance Committee. Acknowledge the receipt of the FY 2016 Treasurer's Report presented by George Panleon, Finance Committee Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is our requirement under Illinois statute to acknowledge receipt of a treasurer's report for the prior fiscal year that goes through in detail all the expenditures of the city, among other things. We discussed this a few minutes ago at the Finance Committee meeting, and this treasurer's report is published in a local newspaper within 6 months after the end of each fiscal year. So the report will be published on October 20th, 2016, and that'll be published in the Lake Forester. And the report is in our package for us to review, and we, as I said, discussed it a few minutes ago. So we need to acknowledge receipt of the report. And
So moved.
Second.
So roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Pandeleon?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
5 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy. Next item, consideration of an ordinance providing for the redemption and payment prior to maturity of $6,105 of general obligation bonds, Series 2008, first reading, presented by Elizabeth Holub, Finance Director.
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. You did receive a presentation on this in the past hour at the Finance Committee meeting. Basically what it is consideration of first reading approval of an ordinance that would allow for $5.6 million in proceeds from the sale of the Laurel Avenue property, which was received at closing, in combination with $500,000 in fund balance reserves, to redeem the outstanding maturities related to the 2008 bond issue. What that would allow for is redemption of $6.1 million in bonds and interest cost savings of $1.357 million. Redemption of those bonds would forego any required interest through the maturity of the bonds, which yields the savings. And instead of those debt service levies being included on the property tax levy, the city could opt to instead place the same amount of money in a capital improvement levy, allowing for additional pay-as-you-go funding for capital improvements. It would not change the total tax levy overall. It would simply move it from a debt service levy to a capital improvement levy. So as stated before, the recommendation is to consider first reading approval of the ordinance authorizing the redemption of these bonds. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions for Elizabeth? Anything? I think we did talk, Elizabeth, at the Finance Committee meeting that these bonds that we're planning on paying off were a portion of the bonds that we issued to fund the new MS facility on the west side. So I think it's important for the community to know that we're doing what we said we'd do, which was sell Laurel Avenue and begin to pay off that debt. And I think it's a smart way to go. Any other questions?
Yeah, the savings of doing this was about what,
$1.357 million.
Okay, and that's over how many years?
That is through
12.
2028, so 11 years.
11 years.
Okay. And I think, not to beat a dead horse, but critically important when you consider the rate of rise of some of our other obligations, such as pensions, that we do things like this. Because even though that seems like a ton of money relative to the growth of the other programs, it's not a lot of money, but it's at least a piece of the puzzle.
Right, but if you look at this chart, the initial cost savings tend to be more front-end loaded. You see the interest cost savings column there, so we have an opportunity to perhaps chip away at this problem. And the way compounding works, and I've talked about this a number of times, the more we could commit to it up front, the less it would become later. So,
I think the other issue that kind of Elizabeth has carried through, the capital levy issue that's important to remember is, how often has this council had discussions about, quote, when the lines cross? And the lines are going to cross on the capital side also very quickly. And so in a period of 2, perhaps 3 years, we're going to be short of capital dollars. And we'll have to start making some decisions about that, whether that be simply looking for more dollars, which I don't think anybody wants to do, or considering reducing our capital plan. And this allows us to solve that without really getting any additional tax increase. And I think that's important as well.
Just one other observation, you didn't put the chart up, but of all the outstanding debt obligations that the city has, at the moment, these particular 2008 bonds are the most costly from an interest rate standpoint.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public care to comment? If not, I'd ask for a motion to grant first reading of an ordinance authorizing the redemption of 2008 GO bonds maturing December 15, 2017 through December 15, 2027 on December 15, 2016. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Pandeleon?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
5 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy. Any other comments by council members this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda, opportunity for citizens to address the council on non-agenda items. Anyone care to address the council this evening on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 5, items for omnibus vote consideration. There are 6 this evening. As we always do, I'll read all 6. If any member of the council would like to take one individually, we can do so, and if not, we'll ask for a motion to approve all of them at the end. Item number 1, approval of the October 3, 2016 City Council meeting minutes. Number 2, award of a contract for professional services consultation on the purchase of a new electronic data management system. Number 3, approval of the purchase of computer workstations, laptops, and iPads for all city departments as budgeted in FY 2017 capital plan. Number 4, award of a bid for a generator maintenance contract included in the FY 2017 to 2019 operating budget. Number 5, award of a bid for the McCormick Ravine Stormwater Improvement Project. And number 6, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 95 of the City Code as recommended by city staff, and that would be final approval. Any of those items to be taken separately? If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve the omnibus.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Pandeleon?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
5 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy. Number 6 this evening on the agenda is ordinances. There are no ordinances to come before the council this evening. Number 7, ordinances affecting code amendments. Consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 116 of the City Code is recommended by city staff, and this is first reading, presented by Victor Filippini, City Attorney, but ably stood in tonight by Robert Pickrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you have before you is an ordinance amending Chapter 116 of the City Code. As this council knows, on January 2015, we undertook an ordinance updating the City Code, and since that time, my office has been working with city staff to make sure the current version of the City Code is consistent with city practices. What you have before you in Chapter 116 is the culmination of that effort. It relates to pawnbrokers, and you'll see this ordinance basically provides with greater specificity the information that would need to be provided when acquiring or when applying for a pawnbroker's license in Lake Forest.
Any questions on this?
I'm sort of curious about whether we have any pawnbrokers in
same
Lake Forest
question.
at the moment. I mean, I'm not a regular user myself. We do?
We do have one.
Okay, good. Well, no, it looked like, and you make this easy for us. I mean, we can read the red lining and the black lining, and so, okay. Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Isn't there another, there's something here about vehicles stored in the front yard? Am I in the right place? Is this,
That's a different section.
there's a different section, it's
Is that safety? Was that in the safety
Yeah, there were- I
section?
thought
That
there
might
were
have been the one
two.
we just voted for.
health and sanitation. Did we already vote for that? Okay, never mind. There is a typo, but I'll share that after the meeting.
That's not in this.
I had the same question about the pawnbroker. Let's see. Do we have, I mean, this is the kind of thing I would think we also might want to have applied to things like check cashing, currency exchanges, consumer loan operations. Is that handled elsewhere in the code, or?
I don't believe that you, not that I'm aware of, but I would need to review the code to and see where those things you listed are specifically addressed. Although sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head.
We'll verify it between first and second reading.
Okay.
Anything else? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve an ordinance amending Title 11, the Business Regulations, Chapter 116 of the City Code is recommended by city staff, first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Item number 2, under ordinances affecting code amendments, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 156 of the City Code is recommended by the Plan Commission, first reading, presented by Catherine Cerniak, Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a recommendation that comes to you from the Plan Commission. It was also reviewed by Alderman Edelman, given his interest and expertise in this area. I will note that this particular chapter of the code, Chapter 156 subdivisions, was extensively reviewed by the Plan Commission in 2011 under the leadership of then Chairman Reisenberg. And if I remember correctly, I think this was one of his favorite projects because it extended over a number of months and we got into it in great detail. So there are not many changes that are recommended. 3 key changes. The amount of the financial guarantee at the recommendation of Alderman Edelman was raised to the statutory maximum, 110%, to assure that all the build-out occurred as it was approved and as it was required to be built out. Second, based on a recommendation from the city attorney, we formalized the acceptance process for public improvements. In the past, when subdivisions have had public roads, public sewers, public sanitary sewers, public water mains, we have really pretty informally brought those to the city council upon completion of the subdivision and upon the recommendation of the city engineer, and asked the city council to accept the public improvements. And we pretty much said everything's done, we should accept them, and from then on, the city is responsible for maintenance and replacement. Upon the advice of the city attorney, we have formalized that process, and now we will actually bring a resolution before the city council to really memorialize that action. It will be easier to track. We will have a more detailed record of exactly what was approved, why, and what was included. So that was a change. And the third change, again, was a recommendation of Alderman Edelman. There was a fairly detailed, convoluted section in this code that spoke to phased road improvements in subdivisions. And as Alderman Edelman rightfully pointed out, it really was geared for a time when a subdivision was approved on one side of the street and nothing was happening on the other, so we'd let people build half a street. So we took that language out. There is still language in here that would allow the city council to phase improvements of the street, and usually what that entails is not putting the final lift on the street until all the work is done, until a majority of the homes are done. So it still gives us that flexibility, but removes the language that really was complicated. A few other minor changes, but if you choose to do so, we are just recommending first reading this evening. We will ask the city attorney to give this chapter another review and then bring it back to you at your next meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Kathy? If not, I'd ask for a motion to grant first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 156 of the City Code as recommended by the Plan Commission and incorporating modification as suggested by Alderman Edelman. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, new business. Any new business to come before the council this evening? Number nine, additional items for council discussion. I have a brief one. I want to thank the kindergarten class at Cherokee School for allowing me to come in and spend some time with them today. I hope they're all in bed right now, however. But it was great, and I'll tell you, they had some great questions. They're terrific kids. And I'll tell you, sitting and watching and listening to those kids, you know that our community is in very good hands in the future. So it was great. So thank you to the kids and the teachers today. If nothing else to come before the council, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Have a good evening.